Movies to games work out way more often than video games to movies. I'm sure that's not a terribly polarizing opinion among anyone, and today I have two examples in the form of LEGO games. It's one of the better Tolkien games I've played, with the exception of a few titles that I may review in the future. The amount of characters, items, puzzles, and places to explore is astounding to me. The only major failing I'd say the series has is the fact that the Hobbit game doesn't have the last third of the story, which is just a little bit of a bummer. See, the game was made after the second Peter Jackson Hobbit film was released in 2014. It looks like they were planning to release a DLC of the Five Armies, but that never happened, and sadly, probably never will. The game ends as Smaug destroys Lake Town. This did sour my experience with The Hobbit at first, but honestly, it's a little better than The Lord of the Rings, strictly talking about mechanics. If it got a chance to be fully finished, I think it would have been a far better game. Although I could say the same for the Lord of the Rings LEGO game, as tiny parts of it felt unfinished as well, but as I've said, I'm biased. Now, this is a review of the game as it is today, when the video was released, and my experience playing it on PC. I've only played a few of the other LEGO games very briefly, so this is not going to include mechanics from the other LEGO games. I will be reviewing the games as one homogeneous game, since so much of it is similar, but we'll talk about the differences and what I enjoyed more. For a bit of a quick history on the games, LEGO Lord of the Rings was released in 2013, and the LEGO Hobbit was released in 2014, both developed by Traveller's Tales, except for the handheld and mobile that was released by TT Mobile. Traveller's Tales has worked on various Disney games, Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex, a bunch if not most of the LEGO games including Bionicle Heroes, and one of my all-time favorite racing games, The Muppet Race Mania. Both LEGO titles were removed from digital stores in 2019 and re-released in 2020, which are the versions I'm playing now. Other than that, I couldn't find any particular reason why The Hobbit never got a third installment as DLC, except for what I understood as speculation around licensing. If anyone has any links for people to check out, please share them in the comments. Alright, let's jump into this review, my fungoids. Both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit have a similar base to their gameplay, and I'd imagine other LEGO games like Harry Potter or Star Wars do as well, but since the Tolkien LEGO games are my entry titles into the LEGO universe, I don't know how they compare. Those reviews may come in the future though. But you run around, breaking apart things made of LEGO, collecting bits that are used to purchase various items, characters, and cheats. These games are basically giant collectathons. Different puzzles require different characters and items to solve, so I finished the campaign of both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, so I had a bunch of items and characters already at hand when exploring the overworld in much more detail. These puzzles and mini-games range from using Gandalf's magic to move large blocks, finding loot with Aragorn's ranger skills, using elven agility to hop around obstacle courses, mining supplies with dwarves, moving heavy objects with trolls, blowing up mithril with explosives, making dwarf stacks, and many, many, many more things to do. I loved almost all of the mini-games, with only a few I found just kinda pointless. The slingshot targets are basically arrow targets that require 3 hits each. Just set up 3 arrow targets so I can aim and quickly hit all of them instead of a slower version of it. Give Ori a different ability like, I don't know, without Samwise we don't have an arsonist among the dwarves, so why not Ori? Anyways, the other minigame I didn't enjoy were these reaction time building games. They're not hard at all, but they felt like they slowed down the pace of the game, even when you could speed them up. Admittedly, it's a cool building animation that looks like it really creates LEGO sets that you could build at home with the right pieces. Most of the puzzles can be done with nearly any character, given you've unlocked the proper item, and oh man, are there a lot of items to play around with. There are two classes of items: the mithril items you forge at the blacksmith in Bree, and the items you collect across levels. The mithril items require mithril blocks, found hidden throughout the game, given as rewards for quests and completing certain puzzles. Each item generally has a custom ability, some useful, others for fun, or causing havoc across LEGO Middle-earth. My favorite items in Lord of the Rings were the mithril hairbrush that changes the miniature's hairdos, the mithril ice bow that freezes people into solid chunks of ice that explode in spectacular fashion when struck, and the sexy mithril jazz horn that forces everyone around you into uncontrollable dance. Items in The Hobbit were a bit more fun in my opinion, and that's probably due to the fact that items were given a little description in The Hobbit, whereas in Lord of the Rings you just get to see the name. So I probably didn't know the use of every item in Lord of the Rings, but nonetheless I enjoyed them in The Hobbit more. The items also just feel much more imaginative in use in The Hobbit, and even if it's just a copycat item of a staff, it would at least have a theme designed around it, like the tuning fork staff that dings every time you hit something with it in melee range. There are so many weird items that give The Hobbit an edge when it comes to the sandbox endgame, where I ran around experimenting and mostly fucking around with the denizens of Middle-earth because why not, right? Come on, Saruman, let's go scour Hobbiton.
No, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Oh, my eyes! My eyes! Ah! Ah!
Like, running around killing people with the quote hammer that has Christopher Lee giving the murdered people positive advice as I scour the Shire as Saruman is amazing.
Knowledge is power. Listen, let me teach you. Allow me to help you.
This dazzling afro stuns your friends and foes alike while giving any character who wears it absolute peak style. Thranduil looks fabulous with it truly. So does Galadriel, but honestly, every incarnation of Galadriel is bae. The mithril skelly mask makes everyone else into a skeleton when you get close enough to them. It even works on your own characters, so you can make skeletal versions of almost everyone. These mithril dance shoes throw your dwarves and hobbits that can team up into a jig, and a different pair of slippers let you hug each other with your team-up ability. Some items are just cool, such as the glowing staff. It's so dumb, but looks like the LEGO lightsabers I used to have as a kid. I love the design of the stud shovel. Digs out extra studs from dirt piles like me and my viewers. The potato is the apology letter to the Lord of the Rings game for not referencing this legendary line from the Two Towers. It works like a bomb and can destroy mithril. There's just something so funny about a potato having such power.
One potato to rule them all.
My new headcanon is that Smeagol knew this from direct experience from the Great Hobbit Potato War. He can't even stand seeing the sight of an inactive potato. The Giddy Up staff creates a spectral horse, which is so cool. You do have other horse mounts you can use, but I personally love the spectral mount the most. The last items I'll mention are only fashion, but you have a mushroom crown you can equip, and it's as adorable as it sounds. Both games have a large set of characters to play. I think I enjoyed Lord of the Rings a bit more in this department since I spent a good chunk of time customizing characters into more friendly characters like Fëanor, Fingolfin, and Beren. Random custom dudes I made like Aragorn, the king of orcs who is somehow descended from the Dunedain because I said so. The beard of Sauron is exactly who you think it is, the cooler brother of the mouth of Sauron. My favorite original character is the Witch King of Angmar. The black on gray, the big ol' helmet, and look at the power pose he strikes. Clearly opposed to assert dominance on us filthy mortals. The Lothlorien elf has a sick helmet and my absolute favorite weapon design from the Peter Jackson films, the Elven Greatsword. Now, although The Lord of the Rings did better with characters in general, The Hobbit had a stellar set of characters to play with as well. I really enjoyed the spectral version of Sauron, although it also kinda hurts my eyes to look at. The Hobbit also had a set of characters the Lord of the Rings did not, which were the giant troll characters. You can't play them on any of the levels as far as I know, but free roaming and killing things can be a pretty good time. I didn't touch the Hobbit's minifigure customization too much, mostly because I couldn't give the minifigures items to carry, and I really love doing that in Lord of the Rings. Maybe you can do it in The Hobbit, but I didn't find the option in-game. Levels are a bit hard to comment on. I felt most of the levels in The Hobbit were mechanically more fun, but playing through the nostalgic-filled story of Lord of the Rings will always take a slight edge over The Hobbit. Helm's Deep is one of my favorite levels of all, and being able to charge out to Gandalf is one of the greatest things of all time. It also may be the only game to allow you to do that. The Hobbit has nothing even close. LEGO Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit had 2 bonus levels. In the Lord of the Rings, you get to take over Middle-earth with Sauron, or fuck some shit up with a giant from The Hobbit. They're tiny little levels, but I just love the concept behind having a chance to annihilate Middle-earth instead of saving it. Forging was in both games, but The Hobbit made it into a quick minigame that I didn't mind playing, but it also felt a bit pointless. Still, something cooler about forging your own mithril opposed to hiring the smithy to do it for you. I did have a glitch with the forge at times in The Hobbit. Sometimes it would randomly freeze and the character would be stuck standing there. I only caught it on camera the one time. The Hobbit also had supplies around the world to collect that were used for various minigames and for forging the items you craft, which was something I did enjoy doing, as it added an incentive to your random travels around Middle-earth. Another thing The Hobbit had the Lord of the Rings did not were mounts. Now, there were a few minigames that would lend you a horse temporarily, but otherwise, no horse. Maybe there was an item like the Giddy-Up staff in Lord of the Rings that I didn't make or get. There were horseshoes that I think let you run at the speed of a horse, but it still feels like a glaring thing to be missing from a Lord of the Rings video game. The Hobbit had a few added mechanics to the combat, such as teaming up with another character to perform wild attacks and breaking certain walls or objects. I didn't really enjoy these team-ups and only used them when necessary to progress the level. Each character also has an ability you could charge up and use. Most of them do a simple spin attack, and characters like Gandalf use the Force. Kind of an interesting addition, but I kept forgetting they existed at all and nearly forgot to add this portion to the video. The extras and cheats were not something I used much of. There were a few things like invincibility and ×4 studs that were useful, but I didn't use or collect very many when recording this video, so I don't have much more to say on the matter. Quests were available in both games and were mostly ways to get mithril bricks or extras. In The Lord of the Rings, I believe they were all fetch quests for items, but in The Hobbit they give you a bit more variety in the form of escort missions or to kill a group of enemies. Nothing amazing, but a lot of the mission concepts were just kind of funny, like unclogging a toilet.
Did you bring me the pinecone bomb I asked for? Thank you very much. This should make short work of that blocked drain I have at home.
Sound is exactly what you would expect from games based directly on the Peter Jackson films. Plenty of copyrighted music that I've mostly replaced with Baldur's Gate music. For more specific info on songs used, check my pinned comment. Voice work is directly taken from the film and works alright. Some of it sounds a bit off at times, but I didn't expect the games to have any voice work at all. The best voice acting by far comes from Christopher Lee, who doesn't only voice the quote hammer, but voiced the introduction sequences for levels in the Hobbit game.
Company passed into the mountain through the secret door, their goal finally within reach. Matters were now left to their burglar to once again show his worth.
Both games also had voiced NPCs that, honestly, sound pretty decent even if it's a little generic at times.
Hello, my friend. Would you like to know the secret of absurd wealth?
Some mischievous orcs made off with my beard comb.
A mithril mushroom crown.
I think I can make an heirloom out of that.
I'm surprised a LEGO game looks this good. It feels like you're on the sets of Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. You can walk from Hobbiton all the way to Mordor or the Lonely Mountain. It's not to scale by any means, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't wander through both Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit games here, just relaxing and taking in the world around me. I personally like how the Hobbit game looks just a bit more in a purely graphical sense. It has that extra pop of color to it that the Lord of the Rings game is lacking. Although this lack of color does suit the darker tone and theme, so I can understand the choice. Overall, I enjoy walking through the Lord of the Rings overworld lore as it was more varied than the Hobbit in the types of terrain and cultures to represent. It's hard to explain. I like the colors and the forests within the Hobbit, but something about Lord of the Rings' overworld just feels better, and I can't really name why. Probably nostalgia. There's something that feels so right and familiar about how this game looks. The LEGO bits contrast enough to show you the parts of the world you can interact with easily enough. It feels a bit like when I first played Dungeons & Dragons. We would pick minifigures and set them up on custom-made maps filled with fake trees, streams, and rocks to run wild with our chaotic evil characters, cause evil's for cool kids, yo.
Now you see that evil will always triumph, because good is dumb.
The minifigures are great representations of the movie counterparts, although a few of them can look very similar. That's bound to happen when your main characters are a bunch of curly-haired white dudes represented with blocky Lego pieces. I was also very happy with the animations from scene to scene. The faces were lively and expressive, even with only a few dots and lines representing their faces. Overall, pretty good cutscenes. You get exactly what's in the films, filtered through the child-friendly lens of LEGO, which is a lot more fun than I thought it'd be. So I'm happy to follow the crew again into Middle-earth to destroy the Dark Lord. Is it accurate? Not really, but neither were the Peter Jackson films. As much as The Two Towers has one of the best war scenes in a film to date, it's only a single chapter in the book. It's a great chapter, don't get me wrong, but not what you would call accurate since Helm's Deep took the majority of the Two Towers film. The Hobbit is a little different. It's the definition of butter scraped over too much bread, yet the over-the-top nonsense of the Hobbit films makes for a great LEGO parody. I don't expect LEGO to stick to the source. I don't expect to be getting the Tolkien-approved experience of Middle-earth, but in taking this non-serious approach, it truly feels like it represents The Hobbit far better than the Peter Jackson films ever did. It totally sucks that the LEGO Hobbit will never get a true ending, and will sit in limbo forever with Lake Town being eternally terrorized by Smaug. But I can forgive it for that.
I forgive you.
Both the games have little added bits of lore missing from the film, like Tom Bombadil. He doesn't get a spotlight at all, but you can find him sitting around and play him as a character. You can even pretend you're guiding the hobbits to the Dark Forest when doing the Nazgul level. It's also cool how they incorporated Gandalf's magic. As a kid, I was confused by the film's depiction of magic, which feels nearly non-existent. Here, in the fight between Gandalf and Sauron, we get them shooting lightning, force pushing, and, shaking the Tower of Orthanc when doing other random abilities. It's kind of crazy. The Hobbit barrel bit was kind of awesome and a great way to have me distracted over the fact Lego Legolas isn't supposed to be here. Something I discovered about the Lord of the Rings movies was this one-eyed fucker was named Gothmog, and I only remembered that name from the Silmarillion as the Lord of Balrogs who struck Feanor dead. Apparently there's a single mention of the name Gothmog in the Lord of the Rings, but there's no description of what Gothmog is, so he could be a man, he could be an orc. Peter Jackson chose to make him an orc. Alright. Why the hell does Bomber eat orc meat? No, really, most of the meat you collect in-game is from slain orcs, and you literally feed Bomber to jump on his fat belly. This is just so confusing and makes me ask so many questions. Like, do the dwarves become corrupted by the orc meat if consumed too long? Do the dwarves consider the orcs sentient? Would anyone else on Middle-earth consider this a crime against nature? I thought it was fucked enough that you were skinning the orcs, but really? You're flaying these creatures alive so you can feed your fat-ass dwarf a bit of food to get a shiny sword. The war crimes were probably worth it. I experimented around with the Shadow Blade a bit, and the moment I gave it to the Witch King, he was given an exact copy of himself instead of a shadowy Lego figure, like the other characters. To me, this is an interesting detail, as the Witch King here exists between the seen and unseen world. You, I, hobbits, dwarves, and humans only exist and see within the seen world. The unseen world is essentially a parallel dimension that certain creatures can enter and leave at will. Creatures like dwarves, hobbits, and humans cannot see creatures of the unseen world without assistance, or if they exist within both of them like elves and ringwraiths. Nazguls are examples of creatures that exist within both worlds, and it's why when Frodo puts on the ring, we have the true form of the Nazguls revealed, as well as them being able to see Frodo much better. So it's my assumption that the Shadow Blade is creating a clone of you within the unseen world, in a similar fashion to how Madara creates clones within Limbo. That would be why the Witch King gets an exact copy instead of a shadow form, as this is the version inside the unseen world. This would be all but confirmed, but Bilbo does not get a full exact clone when wearing the One Ring and using the Shadow Blade, so I guess I might be wrong. Now, this is the first time I've got to talk about mushrooms to any extent since they have a good handful for me to evaluate. I'm only going to talk about the mushrooms from The Hobbit as they were very plentiful in contrast to the Lord of the Rings game. These dotted, colorful mushrooms are called Amanita muscaria, but have been known by various names throughout history and are the image most people conjure up when thinking about mushrooms. Usually they are red, but can be found as an orange or yellow, which match what we see out in the wild with variants of the red Amanita muscaria. Though we run into a bit of a problem when the colors begin to deviate from red, orange, and yellow with colors like purple, light blue, green, and almost fully white. I don't believe Amanita muscaria come in these colors. There was one website that was discussing what one mycologist claimed was a photo of a blue Amanita muscaria, but everyone on the forum, and even myself, think that the photo looks super tampered with. Though that doesn't mean there isn't a light blue mushroom we can match it with. The blue boys are probably Stropharia aeruginosa. They have the white specks with blue color. I couldn't find a direct correlation for these purple and glowing green mushrooms that have the same dotting as the other ones we were just looking at, so I'm just gonna shrug my shoulders at them. And there are plenty of bioluminescent mushrooms as well as deep purple mushrooms, but none that fit well enough to make any sort of real evaluation on. I also couldn't find a similar mushroom to these regular green mushrooms that aren't glowing. The white mushroom could potentially be Amanita carnifila, which is a white mushroom dotted with dark spots all over. Some red mushrooms are seen growing from what I assume are dead trees, which isn't unusual as deadwood is a hive for fungal species. Though I can't find any species of red mushrooms of this large growing on dead trees, so I don't think it's based on anything. The only non-Lego mushrooms I think I can identify are these purple ones that would be called violet webcaps. With all of that said, I'm not truly able to evaluate these mushrooms since I can't see the gills or the stems properly. And I'm also not a mycology expert, I'm very much just a dude who likes reading about mushrooms. But it was fun doing some research about mushrooms for a video finally, and so I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. These are honestly some of the best Tolkien-inspired games I have ever played. right up there with Battle for Middle-earth and those old console games that recreate the films. I think I liked The Hobbit more. The gameplay and minor things added to the game made a big difference for me. The mounts are a huge bonus. The gameplay loop was just a bit more fun, although the map world was far better in Lord of the Rings, but that could be from nostalgia over my favorite movie trilogy. Sadly, the Hobbit game will most likely never be complete, but if you can get it on a sale or get it from a pirate and you're a fan of LEGO, it's worth the play. I would probably recommend Lord of the Rings overall though, since I imagine most fans of Peter Jackson films prefer the Lord of the Rings trilogy to the Hobbit trilogy. Well, that's it. If you enjoyed the review, consider subscribing, throwing me a like, or dropping me a comment since it helps out my channel immensely. Otherwise, have a good one, you fungoids. Thanks for watching.